Hello, welcome to Newmarket Public Library's introduction on 3D printing. In this video, we're going to go over how 3D printing works, as well as how to prepare prints for the library to print off. A few safety concerns that we need to get out of the way first. In 3D printing, the nozzle is heated to a very high temperature in order to print the actual object. So avoid touching the nozzle while it's printing, as well as there's a lot of moving parts on the printer. So you shouldn't be putting your hand near it anyways because you could pinch yourself on the printer. There is a glass box that we have around both of our 3D printers here at the library. So this should help protect you against both of those safety concerns. So as long as you've got that closed, you have nothing to worry about. With that out of the way, let's get into how 3D printers actually work. 3D printing is one of few manufacturing processes that is additive, which means that instead of stripping parts away from a big block, say you're sculpting something. So in sculpting, you strip away parts to come up with your final product. Whereas in 3D printing, we start with nothing and we build up layer by layer on the build in order to have a final product. So the way it does that is there is a moving nozzle that goes across a build plate, and the nozzle heats up plastic that is filled into it to a very high temperature, and then that melted plastic is dispensed onto the build plate. The filament then is cooled off near instantly, hardening, and the nozzle continues moving around and printing the project. After a layer is done being built, the build plate is moved down, and then the next layer is printed on top of the previous until we come up with the final product. So there's different plastics that can be used in 3D printing. At the library here we use PLA filament, but there's also ABS plastic, as well as others, but those are the two most common. Also, unlike a paper printer, which prints out an object nearly instantly, 3D printing takes much longer. So you can see in the video that's on your screen right now, the print is not taking that long, but that's because it's been sped up. This print actually took many hours to complete. Not only does the 3D printer have to print the outside of the object, it also has to fill in a bit of the object for it to have some sort of structural integrity. This is called infill. The more infill there is, the more of these little hexagons there will be. For builds that are simply artistic and like a little model kind of thing like that, it doesn't need much infill. But say you were printing off a part that needed to be used in an actual mechanical application, then you would need more infill to make sure that it was more structurally sound. Another important part of 3D printing is supports. So on builds that have any overhanging pieces, then you may have to use supports for your build. Because of the way that 3D printers work, it takes a layer and builds upon the previous layer. So if there's an overhanging part, there's nothing for it to build upon. So what the 3D printer will do is it'll print supports out. So those supports will be thin plastic and easy to break off. Here you can also see a different type of support material that we've used. These supports here have been printed in PVA plastic, which is a plastic that will dissolve within water. So here you can see I've put this print into the water in order to dissolve all of the material from the supports. When I take it out of the water, there will be no supports left and you'll just have the final product. Here at the Newmarket Public Library, we use Ultimaker printers, and in order to prepare a print for those printers, you need to use a software called Ultimaker Cura. In that software, you're able to put in .stl and .obj files. To find those files, you can either make them using a CAD software, or you can find models that have already been created on websites such as Thingiverse.com. Those files you can then put into Ultimaker Cura, and then through that software, you can set up the print. You can change things such as the amount of infill you want, the size of it, whether or not you need supports, the nozzle head that you need to use. Smaller nozzle heads will be more detailed but take longer. Larger ones are less detailed but quicker. You can also tell it how many of each object that you want to print off. Once you've made the Ultimaker Cura file, you can send it into the library and then they can have it printed off for you. There is a cost associated with printing off at the 3D printers here. The amount that it costs is dependent on how much plastic is used inside of your model. And with that, you should be all ready to create your own 3D prints here at the library. If you have any more questions, you can come in and see someone at the Maker Hub, or you can give us an email at makerhub@newmarketpl.ca. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day.